Years ago, with my first DSLR, a Nikon D5000, I went out and accidentally shot a whole load of images at ISO 1600. And they were all terrible, grainy, noisy, completely unusable. I just threw them away. But technology's moved on a lot. Modern cameras can shoot at much higher ISOs without noise problems. And we've also got software that can deal with noise in post-production. Now I shoot with this. This is an OM Systems OM1 Mark II, which is a micro four thirds sensor. And one of the things that people often express as a concern with small sensors is their ability to cope with high ISO. Now recently I've shot quite a lot of images at higher ISOs, ISO 3200, and most recently quite a few at ISO 6400. But it did make me wonder, how high can I take the ISO before it starts to become a problem in the image, and how good is the software at actually correcting high ISO noise? So I did an experiment and I thought I'd share the results with you. I hope you'll enjoy the video. If you do, and you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe before you go. Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. So as I said, recently, because I've been doing quite a lot of wildlife, and I've also got a 1.4 teleconverter for my telephoto zoom lens, I've actually been shooting quite a lot of images with higher ISOs. And in fact, I shot quite a lot of images of squirrels at like ISO 6400, which years ago would have been completely out of the question. You just wouldn't do it. But it did make me wonder, given the reputation that Micro Four Thirds has for not handling noise well, what would images shot at higher ISO actually look like before noise reduction and after using some of the noise reduction tools that are available? So I decided to do a controlled test. It had to be controlled because I wanted repeatable results in each of the images. So I set my camera up on a tripod and I just actually photographed some books on this bookcase here behind me. So this is the image that I shot. It's not a masterpiece, it's designed to fulfill a purpose. What you can see from this image is it has some darks, some almost blacks, it has some brights, almost whites, it has lots of contrast, it has colour. And I deliberately had some of the image in focus. I actually focused on the word bird on the Collins Bird Guide, and some of it out of focus. And that's because the way that noise presents itself can be different in sharp and blurry parts of an image, in focus and out of focus parts of an image. And I shot a number of versions of this particular image at different ISOs. They were all shot with the same aperture and focal length. So they were shot at 35mm on my 12-100 lens. And I changed the shutter speed and ISO to get the ISOs that I wanted. The images that I've got on screen at the moment are completely unedited. They've just been imported. They're a raw file. There's been no sharpening, no noise reduction, no color or luminance changes or anything else. And I'm quickly going to skim through the images that I shot with just the normal view on screen. Now bearing in mind this is the normal view in Lightroom, and this is on a 32-inch 4K monitor. So this first image was shot at ISO 800, half a second, and it looks fine. You know, it's sharp where it's supposed to be sharp around here, and it's falling away to softness over on the side here on the left hand side of the image, but there's no evidence of noise. And at ISO 800 I wouldn't expect there to be noise unless it was an underexposed image that I'd boosted the shadows on. The next one I shot was at ISO 3200, and again, looking at it on the normal view on screen here, I can't see anything wrong with it. There's no evidence of noise in particular, maybe a bit of grain over on the far left hand side here, but nothing really noticeable at this view. Then I did ISO 6400, and I confess I made a slight mistake here. I shot it at 1/13 of a second instead of 1/15, so it's actually fractionally brighter than the others, but it doesn't really matter for the purposes of this. And again, on this view, I can't really see any evidence of noise, maybe a little bit of grain creeping in on the far left-hand side, but on a normal view, nothing. I then went up to ISO 12800, and the in-focus area still looks good at this view, but the left-hand side is definitely starting to show some signs of grain, maybe a little tiny bit of colour noise in the whites. I then did ISO 25600, and I'm maybe, because I'm being picky, I can maybe see a little bit of grain in the lettering, like the bit that says bird guide on the here, and I can definitely see some grain and maybe a little bit of colour noise on the left hand side here where it's falling out of focus. And then I did one more, getting a bit silly, at ISO 51200, and on this one I can definitely see some grain and some colour noise, a little tiny bit maybe on the in-focus area on the Collins Bird Guide, but it's very noticeable over on the left-hand side here. You can see the whites in the word photographer, and over on the left here have got colour in that they shouldn't have, and there's grain in these bits here and all around the bit that says AA here. We'll have a quick look at 100% view. This is the ISO 800 version. And as I expect, that's nice and clean. This one is 3200, and I mean, there's nothing in there that would bother me too much, even without applying any denoise to it. Obviously, bear in mind this is a screen recording, so it may not be a completely accurate representation of what I'm seeing on screen. The 6400 one, there's a little tiny bit of grain in that coming in, perhaps on this black and white part of this cover of the book here, and a little bit of grain coming in on the lettering here. Maybe a little bit of colour noise, but not too bad, to be honest. Okay, let's go across to 12800. I'm not seeing anything in particular on the in-focus area, but there's some grain and colour noise definitely starting to appear over on the left-hand side here. But again, not disastrously bad, considering it's ISO 12800. 25600, yeah, there's a 100% view, there's some grain appearing in the in-focus areas, and both grain and colour noise appearing in the out of focus, or the more out of focus areas, so starting to be a bit of a problem. And if we go to 51200, you can see there's considerable noise over on the left hand side here, colour noise, grain, and even grain and colour noise in the in-focus areas. But this is ISO 51200 at 100% view. What I then decided to do is I ran these through Topaz Denoise AI. Now, normally when I denoise an image, I would do it in Photoshop in separate layers so that I can apply different amounts of denoise and sharpening to different parts of the image. But for simplicity on this one, I literally just put it into denoise and ran it through the standard settings. So I didn't play with any of the settings at all. The standard amount of denoise and sharpening that Denoise AI recommends. So let's have a look. So again, this is the full view. This is ISO 800, which didn't actually need any denoise work doing on it. And if I zoom into 100%, it's actually sharpened it a little bit because there's a sharpening component in Denoise AI. Interestingly, it's actually made a bit of a mess of some of the black and whites here. And this is why you have to be careful using something like denoise or any kind of sharpening on things that don't actually need it. And this is why I would normally use layers and layer masks to determine which parts of the image get denoised and get sharpened. But other than that bit, it looks okay. But again, it didn't need denoising anyway because it wasn't noisy. Okay, 3200. The in-focus areas look nice and clean. Actually, interestingly, this bit doesn't look as bad, but I'd still want to do something different with that if I was doing the image properly. It looks a bit harsh, edgy. It looks like it's been over sharpened, and that's probably what's happened. But most of the sides here at ISO 3200 look fine. Let's go to 6400, again slightly brighter because I messed it up, but the in-focus area is fine. Still got the same problem in the pictures of rocks on the side of this thing here that have got an unfortunate effect that we don't want. Hasn't done a complete job of removing noise from the lettering here, but not too bad. And that's at 6400. 12,800, the in-focus area looks good. Possibly a little tiny bit of grain coming into the lettering. But there's still noise in these white letters and around the high contrast areas here where it says AA and on the yellow. So clearly the amount of denoise added here wasn't sufficient to get rid of it, at least for 100% view. 25,600 in focus area still looks okay, but the outer focus area is definitely becoming a problem. Lots of grain still in here, but as I said, this was only minimal denoise, just like the standard settings. And if we go to 51,200, there's a little bit of grain in the in-focus areas, but it very quickly, as that focus starts to drop out, the noise and grain and colour noise starts to creep in, and it becomes quite messy. But this is ISO 51,200. And looking at it at the normal view, you can see that colour noise in here, which kind of ruins the image. So clearly 51,200 is pushing my luck a little bit. But I did decide just to try something else with this. I took this 51,200 ISO raw file and ran it back through Topaz Denoise AI, this time with the severe noise setting. Again, it's one of their defaults, which I wouldn't normally use because I normally play around to try and get the best effect. But let's have a look and see how that's come out. So this is 51,200 and it's been through the severe noise, denoise setting. And the in-focus area looks okay. It might be actually a little bit too soft. So it's maybe done a bit too much, but it's it's not too bad, and it's done a reasonable job over this side. It's not perfect by any means, but 51,200 is pretty high. Now, to be honest, if you were shooting wildlife and maybe cropping in, you'd maybe only be cropping in mostly on the in-focus area and not worrying so much about the out of focus areas anyway, so it might not be too bad. I decided to do one more thing. As 51,200 seems a bit unreasonable, I then went back to my 12,800 ISO image and did a bit better job on it. So I put it into Photoshop, I created some layers, and I applied different amounts of denoise and sharpening to different parts of the image. So let's have a look at the final result, and that's this one. So it's ISO 12,800, and basically I applied different levels of sharpening to the left hand side of the image here, which was the outer focus areas. So this had more noise reduction and less sharpening, and to the in focus areas here, which had a bit more sharpening and a bit less denoise. So looking at it in the normal view, it doesn't look bad at all. And if I zoom in, the in focus area looks pretty good. There's maybe a little bit of noise in here, but I did this quite quickly. Normally, if I had an image that I felt was worth it, I'd spend a bit more time doing it properly. But looking across here, I mean, 100% view, that doesn't look bad for an ISO 12800 image. So it just goes to prove that with a combination of modern camera technology, even if it's a Micro Four Thirds, which is not supposed to be good at high ISO, and some post-processing software to deal with it, high ISO images are not the problem that some people seem to think they are. And that's it. That's what high ISO looks like on my camera, the OM Systems OM1 with OM1 Mark II with the Micro Four Thirds sensor. It's been a useful exercise for me actually, because it tells me that I can usefully shoot at ISO 12800 if I need to, without having to worry too much that I can't use the images because of high ISO noise. Now obviously I'm not always going to shoot at high ISO unless I absolutely need to, but it's good to know. Anything more than that, it starts to get a bit dodgy and I'd need a pretty good justification for going too high. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Leave me a comment, let me know what you do in terms of high ISO, or maybe you don't, I don't know. Let me know. And if you're new here and you've enjoyed this, don't forget to hit subscribe before you go. Once again, thanks for watching. Until next week, bye.